What's happening? What's going on? Man, I missed y'all, man. I see it in the comments. I know I've been away for a minute, dealing with some personal stuff. You know what I'm saying? But, man, I'm back. I could not be more happy to be back. And, yeah, welcome to Mint Street Mondays, home of the One Carolina's interactive platform where you are the most important on this here show. I appreciate y'all for being with me this morning as we gear up 1 week away, 1 week and some days away from the NFL draft. So, you know, we'll have some draft talk. We'll bring on our our co-host, Invisible Brad, and, you know, we'll just chop it up, man. Like I said, it's been a minute since I've seen you guys, and I'm so excited to be back. Still kind of getting myself back in the throes of things as far as like health is concerned and everything like that. So, yeah, but hey, without further ado, let's give a shout out to the best. As the OCs, my members, man, I appreciate y'all holding strong. Got some new members. Man, I appreciate y'all so much. If you want to be a part of the OCs, the original cats, you can join for $1.99 per month, and we appreciate you so much for your support. Everybody who has supported this channel from day one. I see some of my day ones in here. Shout out to my moderator, Pop. Been in a day one. You know what I'm saying? And Sean, watching from all the way from, it looks like, where you from, Hungary, man? I may be wrong with the flag, but either way, appreciate you joining us. Says this is the being able to catch Mint Street Monday live internationally, man. So you see this reach goes far beyond, and it's not, you know, just the One Carolina reach, it's the Carolina Panthers reach, man. It's far bigger than even the media would suggest that it is. So we appreciate you guys so much. Like I said, my man Pop, Hollywood goes global in the building. BMB Leo. I'll be tearing words up, man. So my bad. Words, names, all of that. Shout out to Jacoby. Shout out to Miss Velbyhag. Yes, Nicole, moderator, CLT Mall, Unk Sub TV, SC Panthers Boy 803. Man, so good to see you guys. So glad to be back. So I missed quite a bit. The last time that I was around, I did a mock draft, which we'll talk a little bit about that. And some of the thoughts that I have going into next week, where we pick 19th overall, at least for right now. You never know. We can move up. We can move down. Who knows, you know, exactly what they got planned or what they're going to do. But I did see something that I thought was interesting that kind of broke yesterday, and that is this Ruben Bain story. And so apparently Ruben had an accident back in 2024, and this was not a good thing. Someone lost their life as a result of this accident, right? And I, you know, as you do, I immediately got to thinking, because these kind of things come up. It seems like every draft there's always something, right? We go back a few years ago, whether that's something that's just kind of drawn out of thin air or it's something that actually is a thing, right? So this will be one of those things where this is a thing, right? If you're, and I listened to a Commanders podcast, I can't remember which one it was, right? Because the Commanders have been linked to him, you know, where they pick, and, you know, obviously other teams. But this Commanders podcast is almost like these guys are looking for reasons. And look, I could be wrong when it comes to the Commanders fan base. I do have a really good friend, including my dad, who is a Washington fan. He won't call them the Commanders. You know what he actually calls them based on my dad's age. But there are people who are very concerned with the arm length, and they're using that as an excuse to suggest that, you know, Ruben shouldn't get drafted there. So this is kind of further fodder for them. Now, I can tell you this. Two things. Number one, boy, am I glad we ain't at the top of this draft having to make this decision. Woo! Man, great job, Panthers, where you finish the season. But number two, what would Carolina do if he failed? If he's there at 19 and your whole board is looking right in front of you, right? Because I'm sure they have a list of guys, as they do every year. I think Dan Morgan said something like 600 guys, right? We saw back in, you know, I think this was back in like January, February when they were saying that. February, March when they were saying this stuff, right? But they've got 600 guys that they like, right? But at that 19th pick, there's going to be some guys that you know for sure are going to be there. They're not going to put guys like Arville, Reese, and Sonny and people like that because you know they're going way ahead of you, right? But this could be one of those situations where he could fall, right? We remember a few years ago, Laramie Tunsil and the whole, you know, smoking incident or whatever, and what that did to him. And then more recently in the draft where we drafted Bryce Young. Now, again, this is where I mentioned that some of these things just kind of get pulled out of thin air, and then some of them have like actual factual merit, right? The CJ Stroud thing was more, you know, could he process information? You know what I'm saying? His, one of his scores, like I think one of his test scores or whatever, that the Wonderlic or whatever it was low, or whatever. And so I think when I see stuff like this happen, because the question that I would ask is this: why now? Right? Why now? This has been something that's been out since 2024. Clearly, there's in this ESPN report, multiple teams know about this, right? So they're very familiar with the situation. Why now? I can tell you, draft games, right? This is draft games, right? It's an ugly business, but it is what it is. Somebody may want him to fall. Somebody may be trying to sabotage. Who knows? I do know this. I know that, one, he was cited, as this report suggests, but he was let go. As a matter of fact, in a statement given to the Read Optional, I'm reading this, Bett's family called that crash a tragic accident, and they said they wish Mr. Bain the best as he continues his life and career. Here's what I love about that. They're not trying to do this as a family, right? Because their family won't even come out and say anything. Like, they don't want anything to do with this, right? So it's kind of a hit. It's weird to call it a hit piece because somebody died, and rest in peace to the person who lost their life in this situation. But you could see that it is some sort of it looks funny. It does look funny. So for it to be around this time. But again, my question would be, well, if you're the Panthers and he's there at 19 and you're staring him in the face and, some of the other people in the face that you're interested in that we'll get into further conversation with in a moment, would you take him? And for me, it'd be difficult. It would be hard not to, right? I understand the whole arm length thing and everything like that, right? But we've seen so many guys overcome that. And look, tape is going to tell you everything you need to know. And that's what I would lean more towards. Now, when I was listening to some of these Commanders podcasters and, some from other teams as well, again, this was one of the things that they said, okay, this is kind of the reason why he shouldn't go to us here. This kind of solidifies it. And I'm like, man, you might be missing out on a really, really, really high level player. I wouldn't say generational, just because of because the size, right? Let's just be honest. But I mean, look, you never know. You never know. Rashawn Slater, I talked about it ad nauseum. I was one of those people that when the Rashawn Slater situation was coming around, same deal, where it's like, oh man, the short arms or whatever like that. And it's like, outside of a few injuries he sustained, Rashawn Slater's a real deal, So yeah, I don't think when the tape shows up and you see it there, I don't think any of the rest of this matters. I know that some people have questions about guys like Arvell Reese, like what is he actually going to play at the next level, right? I think off ball, many people think edge, but regardless, whatever the tape shows, that's where they go. They're gonna go where they're gonna go based on that. And I personally, I just wanted to, bring this up as a suggestion to see if he was here, if he was there at 19, will we take him? But do I think he'll fall that far? No, I don't. I don't think this is enough to, if this had happened last month or something like that, then, maybe this changes things. But the fact that he didn't miss any time in college, and he played, and played very well and, was able to go through this whole situation. I don't know if it was a speeding situation, whatever that was. Cited usually means that there's a, speed infraction or something like that, or a distraction or whatever like that. But again, I don't think this is something that's going to drop his draft stock. But boy, I tell you, every year you can count on it. Draft games going to happen. They're going to do something to try to, drive the market down on some of these players and their opportunities, or to maybe a team behind the scenes is kind of, we see this whole Diana Rossini and Mike Vrabel thing just kind of shows you what kind of stuff can go on behind the scenes and how reports can be manipulated and, all this other kind of stuff because of, personal relationships, not necessarily platonic relationships, but just, personal relationships in general, to try to maybe tank his draft stock to make him fall somewhere where he normally, wouldn't go. So I don't know. You tell me what y'all think, man. I look at the comments and see what y'all think. Maul says, because one thing we all have to remember, he's in the University of Miami Football Hall of Fame. So if anybody got intel of his situation, it would be him. It says, I'm not going to lie. If he does fall to 19, Dan probably take him no hesitation. That's what he says. Donnie Alford says, I'd take him, but I think safety, first pick, second pick, Rodriguez. And then Donnie Alford also said agreed. So, yeah, it's funny you say that about Dan Morgan and what he knows based on information. because I have a theory, right? And we're going to get to it a little bit later in the show. This will be something I want. I definitely want Brad to be available to hear this whenever I present this theory, because I think the Panthers are going to shock us at 19. I do. I think there's going to be a shocking pick made that people don't see coming. And I'm excited to reveal what I believe that pick is going to be. But that said, make sure y'all smash that like button. It is free. Appreciate y'all being here this morning, joining me back on Mint Street Mondays. It has been a little while, but we are back in action ahead of this is a pre-draft week, if you will, but exciting times nonetheless. But speaking of, so I did drop a mock draft. This was, I want to say 3 weeks ago. And obviously there were a lot of, there's a lot of fodder surrounding that mock. Some people that really loved it. Some people, didn't agree with it. Some things that I messed up on, like one in particular with the player that I picked at 19, and that was not Dylan Thieneman, Dylan Thieneman. Of course, I butchered his name as I normally butcher stuff. But, I chose him at pick 19. When I made the mock, most people, like every mock that I've ran, like on any kind of site, whether that was, PFF or, PFSN or whatever, or PFN or whatever it's called, the mock draft site. Everybody has him going right before us at 18 to the Vikings, right? But here lately, he's been kind of falling a little bit. Like things have, kind of changed up a bit, and consensus says that he might actually drop, some. Now, I don't believe that. Personally, I think Dylan Thieneman may go even higher than that. I think it's possible that, a team like Kansas City with 2 picks, a team like, Dallas with a couple of picks, like it's an attractive option, right? But if he was there, for me personally, now I'm going to say this, based on new information, something that I've said that I would do that I think could possibly be done may happen, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But for my money, this is what I would like to see personally, right? Now, I get it. Josh Norris from Underdog Fantasy, shout out to Underdog, shout out to Josh Norris, who used to cover the Panthers. I saw a quote from him that suggested that the Panthers are more than likely going to go receiver or offensive line at 19, right? And I wouldn't be mad either way. I wouldn't be upset either way with that. But for my money, I would love to see you get a safety, the ball hawk type that can control the back end, the back third of your defense, right? Or the back half of your defense. And I think he fits the bill, right? Now, I know Emmanuel McNeil-Warren is someone who people like a lot, but I think he kind of does similar to, and look, is it possible that he can do the more free safety? Yeah, of course. But from what I've seen and what I've heard and what people have said, it feels to me like he's more in the same line of like the Moreg and Lathan Ransom, right? And so I know that NFL defenses have changed drastically on how you use players and stuff like that. But I do still think someone who had 6 interceptions, 6 pass breakups. I can't remember how many interceptions he had. Oh no, it was the previous year with Purdue, 6 picks, or either previous year or 2 years ago, something like that. I still think there's that version of him still exists, at a high level, right? And so I really like him. I think he's an instinctive player. I love something I had mentioned before, and I heard Smitty mention this about another player recently, about how when players don't really have to think, when they can just play free, like when they understand what they're doing, from an intellectual perspective, it changes the level of play, right? And I think that we are starting to get to a point where we have a lot of that on the field. Now, there's still some of that, in my opinion, that you have to change, right? Because a guy like Nick Scott, for example, Nick Scott, who played fairly well, down the stretch, and then some moments where he just looked lost. To me, that was, in my opinion, I wonder, because you're talking about a Super Bowl winning safety, mind you, right, from another team. I do wonder sometimes if scheme and how things change with the scheme and the terminology and things like that change so often when you go from one place to the next. It's like, is that kind of why you don't play as free? Is that why you make a mistake as a veteran? Like, I never will forget that, I want to say this was his first snap in an NFL game, right? Derek Carr bombs down the field to Alontae Taylor, I believe it was. and touchdown. And him and J.C. Horn looking at each other like, yelling at each other like, what's going on, man? And it's like, you just wonder, like, because of that, changeover in the terminology. It's like, how does a guy that's a veteran that played well there or played fairly well or whatever it was over in LA come over here and have struggles the way he has, right? So to me, it's not just having that physical ability. It's just having that ability to be able to study, to know what and where you need to be, and then not think about it. And that's what I think a guy like this is. Like, I think that, Dylan Thieneman is one of those guys that he just has the instincts. He plays with anticipation, and that's a lot of that position out there, right? Because sometimes you do have to anticipate where things will happen, right? And so, I was locked in with him at 19. I saw a lot of people that were, really big on that pick as well, who, agreed with that. And then some people who objected. But, either way, I think it'll be really cool. But anyway, Donnie said, I think he's more of a ball hawk. I like the pick. Yes, I agree. I couldn't agree more. I think he is too. And I think you need that. I think especially you bring back Nick Scott because you want Nick to be, kind of that veteran presence. And I know and look, I'm going to stand on this to some degree. Like, you never know what guys can develop themselves into. I would love to see a world where Lathan Ransom could develop into that and take that spot. But it's probably going to be more advantageous for the Panthers to go grab a guy like this because he's already ready for that, right? So, hey, shout out to Rockstar Report, man. Appreciate you coming over, man. I like your content too, brother. I appreciate you, man, very much. Poppin says, I'll take Bain all day because safety is deep in this draft. You don't have to reach. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that Dylan Thieneman would be a reach necessarily, but I do agree with you that this is a deep safety class, a deep linebacker class as well. So, yep. Let's see here. We got a first super chat of the day. Shout out to Raisin Kane, man. I appreciate you for the super chat. Raisin Kane says, good to see you back. Had to do a stop. So catching up a little bit. I think our offseason really set up for best player available, truly. God bless. God bless you too, man. Yes, sir. It's good to be back. But yeah, I agree too. I think that we are kind of set up in a situation where, best player available is and look, what a beautiful thing for that to be for us, right? You see all these reports about wide receiver, edge rusher. I did see Dave Canales say something that I really, really liked. He said, we are not into like stacking players, right? Like, so, or building deep. I think because he says that, but he's saying it in reference, in context of the 19th overall pick. So it's like, if it just so happens to be that we get to 19 and 2 or 3 of the guys that we would have taken are off the board, right? Conventional wisdom would say, all right, well, in that case, take Akeem Messidor, right? If he's there. Oh, sorry. No bad. Take Akeem Messidor if he's there. But I like his reasoning. We did that one time before. Remember, I want to say after the Super Bowl, we lost Coney Ely. I know we still kept Kawan. We still kept Starla Tulele, but I'm pretty sure we lost Coney that year. I could be wrong, but I know Coney ended up in New England, right? We drafted Vernon Butler. There were other places you could have went, at pick, what was it, 31, 32? Because we were one of the Super Bowl teams. I think it was 32. So you could have went another direction, right? But you just kind of doubled down on what you already had, but to make a stronger strength, right? And Vernon, for the career that he did have, was not, to me, I mean, the pick, we could have went another direction, in my opinion. That's, he went on to have a solid career. Not a great career, but of course he wasn't like a top first-round pick, but he was a first-round pick nonetheless. You didn't get the production out of him. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. I'll say that. I like Dave's philosophy here. It's like, look, if there's a guy that's an impact guy, like say, for example, Sadiq, right? Say Dylan Thieneman's gone, some of your other guys that you're really interested in are gone, but Kenyon Sadiq is right there, right? Now, I have a different opinion about Sadiq than most people do, and it's not so much that I don't like Sadiq because I think he's excellent, and I think he's going to be really good in this league. And maybe I'm jaded because of what I've seen from the tight end position here so far. It just doesn't feel like this offense features the tight end the same way as other offenses do, right? So it's like, I wouldn't want to draft a guy where now somebody's obviously not going to make the roster, right? Whether it's Evans, Tommy Tremble, Jatavian Sanders. Now, some people would suggest, well, they kept all of them and then had Steven Sullivan. or who, over the years, or whoever else they, have kept, over time. But like, I don't know. For me, I don't see you keeping all those tight ends if you're going to draft someone like Kenyon Sadiq right there at 19. Now, I do think that he could be the answer to you using the tight end more, right? And maybe we just hadn't got the kind of production that we've desired out of these tight ends. But just in my opinion, I don't see a tight end friendly offense for someone like that, right? So maybe you go to the next bet. Maybe it's Boston, maybe it's another receiver. Maybe it's, who knows, an offensive lineman, or whatever. Like I said, Josh Norris did come out and say that, receiver, offensive line, that's kind of the direction that it feels like that they'll go. But I do like the philosophy of just getting impact players instead of like, hey, let's either directly address a need or just kind of, build on top of an already strength, even though some good teams really do, do that. And if they view Akeem Messidor or, what's the edge rusher from UCF? I can't remember his name. Y'all can help me in the chat. If they view someone like that as a high impact player right there, then I think they can take him. But I'm more fascinated just to see the who's available when the time comes, because I think there's gonna be some guys that go much higher. But who knows? All right, so my dream is Jacob Rodriguez and Keontae Scott in this defense. Hey man, I was gonna do a video on Keontae Scott, and it was gonna be way, way, way before that pro day. Way before that pro day. This dude, with older guys like him, I think the same can be said, because we do this with quarterbacks sometimes, right? A quarterback will have like a lot of success, like Fernando is a great example. Bo Nix is another great example, where they've played a lot of college football, come in a little bit older than some of the quarterbacks would. I like that, and I like that equally with guys that play other positions, right? So with Keontae, spent a lot of time, at, what was it, Auburn? I know he battled some injuries, but by the time he got to Miami, I mean, he's explosive, man. Now he's older, much older. So I don't think that's going to matter for him, right, at all. Now, I don't know if I would take him in the first round, but second and on, yeah, definitely. And then, of course, everybody's talking about the Rodriguez. Poppin says, where them Sadiq freaks at? I agree with you, Big John. The Sadiq freaks. Hey, man, look, like I said, I got nothing against Kenyon Sadiq. I like him. I think he's, extremely talented, and I think in the right place, he's going to flourish. But again, I don't think that that's here. That's just my opinion. I don't see it, like, because of the offense and the type of offense we run. So, and TCJ, excuse me, 2375 says, do you see any scenario where we would go linebacker at 19? And if so, who do you think it would be? I'm gonna get to that. So we're gonna hold on to that one for a minute. Shout out to my man Tyree Ross. I appreciate you, man, joining us today. Make sure to smash that like button, man. Like I said, my co-host Brad will be here very soon. We'll kind of deep dive this a little bit further, but until he gets here, I'm gonna keep moving a little bit forward. So shout out to Edgar Salmingo. So I don't know if you guys follow Edgar on X, but a wealth of knowledge. So he had put together something. He takes lazy people like me and allows me to be able to just read the things that he puts out there and not have to do the own research myself. So he put together a list of the top 30 visits, top 20, top 30, and the 4 local private visits that we had. And I saw some names on here that I thought was very interesting, and I wanted to get y'all's take on it, because there was a few names that I thought was more interesting than others. So let's start with the QBs. Haynes King, Baron Morton, and then Diego Pavia. Now, I started to make a video on this the other day, and I didn't, because I was like, you know what? I don't want people to get the wrong idea. People like my man Pop, like, oh boy, John, they brought in Diego Pavia for a visit. This means your boy is in trouble. This means that they think that he might be able to come in and be developed and take the spot one day. And I'm like, they're going to think I'm hating, right? That's not what this is, right? So I have said on my channel, if you've been here for long enough, that I think that Carolina was going to draft a quarterback in this draft. And I still believe that to be the case, right? Who do I think that is? I don't know. Cade Klubnik, at one time, and look, this is another guy I think is going to be a surprise. We're getting, all the talk about Ty Simpson and everything like that. I still think there's a lot of people out there, similar to last year when Atlanta drafted James Pierce Jr. Coming into the season, James Pierce Jr. was seen as potentially the number 1 overall pick. Now, who knew that he was an absolute nut? But yeah, he was seen as a potential number 1 overall pick. And then he kind of took a back seat. And a lot of this, and look, his production was still off the charts considering all the stuff that was going on at Tennessee that we now see spilling into the NFL, right? But this guy's production was ridiculous. And then out of nowhere comes Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter, goes from off ball to edge, and, the rest is history. But similarly this year, from a quarterback perspective, Garrett Nussmeier was a guy that everybody was talking about at the beginning of the college football season, like pretty consensus number 1 overall pick, right? And Fernando came out of nowhere, right? So I think a guy like Garrett could fall, but I do think there's a lot of people that still like him. He could fall pretty far. Whatever quarterback we do take, I do think it'll probably be like 5th round, 4th, 5th round, maybe 4th, and 4th might be a reach. But yeah, I can see it happening. I very well can see it happening. I do not think Kenny Pickett is a long-term answer. I think Kenny Pickett can be beat out in camp by one of these young guys, right? Now, is that guy Diego Pavia? I hope not. So I'm going to just say it out loud. I hope not. Why? Look, salute to Johnny Manziel, man. Look, anybody that reforms their life, like, I'm with it, man. But if Johnny Manziel's your mentor, stay the heck away from me. I'm sorry. Like, there's just still something there, in my opinion, that's just like, you still just don't get it. And for me, like, Pavia is a baller, man, no doubt, right? But just the optics, man. I do find it funny, another super short quarterback. The one thing I will say about him, though, he ain't afraid to chuck it. He will throw the ball down the field, right? And you are building an offense. That's the one thing I can't wait to see. I know Bryce is very efficient when he throws the ball down the field. I just want to see him be a little bit more like erratic, if you will. Like, I love to see Bryce just have a Jameis Winston game where he's just like, I'm just unleash it. Picks, whatever. I don't even care. Just throw it down. You know what I'm saying? Because you just got weapons that can, really get, take a 9 route to the crib, right? And multiple perimeter weapons. But yeah, no, I wasn't big on the Pavia thing, man, at all. But if that's who they decide to bring in, obviously I'm gonna support it, but it ain't my cup of tea. I wanted to hear what you guys had to say about it. Donnie said Diego would be a great backup. You're getting the same player as Bryce, maybe not as far as reading defense, but a good backup still using throwing lanes instead of height. No change in the game plan. From that perspective, you're not wrong. From that perspective of it, right? Who are you getting in the locker room, though? Who are you getting after the game? Which guy? You getting the guy that, drags the Heisman situation because of, his thoughts about it? Nobody cares about your thoughts. You know what I'm saying? Just so. And like I said, when you get mentored by Johnny, like, look, Johnny has reformed himself, but Johnny still be outside, bro. Like, Johnny's still outside, smoking weed on video and stuff all the time. Like, he's kind of still outside. So to me, it's like, it's the association, right? So, but at least that's my thought. I just, again, I think the guy is talented, but nah, I'm cool. But there were some other names on here that were mentioned. We'll go to the running back, Keelan Black. I think our running back room is okay. I'm interested to see what happens. I'm gonna tell you one thing I'm not gonna speak on, but I will just say, thoughts and prayers, T's and P's between that whole situation. FBFO, them my guys, man. JJ, that's my guy. And I saw that whole exchange between them and Jonathan Brooks. I thought that was, pretty crazy, but it does go to show you. I've told y'all before. I had it on good information that, Rico used to be an avid watcher of the show, still might, but I know that I said what I said, when he said he circled the Panthers, and y'all know how I feel about Rico. Like, I went to the same high school, like it's a lot of proximity there, so I'm always rooting for him. But when I was like, circle the Panthers, like, really, bro? Like, kind of helped you get yourself back on track. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, salute to that situation. But I'm good with the running back room. Brooks, Hubbard, I think ETN. I really like ETN and what he can provide. I went back and watched some of the Dallas game, and I think he's a guy that just needs opportunities. And then obviously AJ Dillon. Who knows if AJ Dillon actually makes the roster? But my guess is that he may. But Let's get to wide receivers. So this was where it got interesting, and this is where it'll get interesting for me for pick 19. Denzel Boston, Deion Burks, KC Concepcion, and Omar Cooper Jr. Now, the most notable name there, the one that's been linked to us the most, is KC Concepcion, and I got to be honest, I like him. I'm not even gonna lie, I do. The only thing I don't like, the one thing that does kind of scare me a little bit, 19 drops over 2 years, right? 7 this year alone. But what he provides, what he will become in this offense is exactly what you need, what you're missing. Somebody that can, get some yak, and look, we got guys. I mean, Jalen Coker get yak from time to time, but like, you don't have anybody that's operating out of the slot that gives you a ton of speed, right? And gives you a lot of open opportunity to, this guy took handoffs. Like he kind of does it all, right? 92 snaps he took in the slot last year at NC State. And then that went down to like the 30. So he can play outside as well, right? Now, for us, the reason I think that KC Concepcion makes more sense with us or like Minnesota or any of those other teams than anybody else is because of that ability to play in the slot. But you can still kind of fill the role, whether it's an injury, whether it's just a scheme thing, you can play outside, but primarily that's going to be your position. And I think that he'll work well, especially because, and I think the drop thing won't be as big a deal because I don't know the nature of the drops, right? Like I was listening to Steve Smith video on him and Smitty was talking about like the quarterback play was not the greatest, right? So that, there's that. There's also like, a smaller guy like this, like where was he, are these drops that are happening on like, corner routes or is this like long developing routes? Like who knows, right? But obviously his tape would know. I haven't looked at that to see. That said though, I just think that he is kind of square peg, square hole situation, right? Like this is a perfect fit. And I know some people, including my co-host, will lose their mind if we pick a receiver for 3 years in a row in the first round. Let me tell you, I would not. Because when you look at, if you go back in history, and I argued this point with Brad off the phone, go look at Cam Newton's best statistical season. And I'm not talking about his 2015 MVP season. I'm talking about from an efficiency perspective, his best statistical season. And look what they did to get it there, right? Yes, Norv Turner was a big part of that, right? But when Cam went from a career 59% completion percentage to when he got hurt, 67% completion percentage in 1 year, that wasn't just scheme. That was also weapons. You drafted Christian McCaffrey. You drafted DJ Moore. You drafted Curtis Samuel. These are things that were happening in succession. So for as equal as people are upset about Cam Newton getting his shoulder blown out and not having the highest production from that point forward, you should be equally upset that they didn't put the kind of weapons around him and keep doing it over and over and over again once they identified like, hey, we got a dude and we can do some things that really help this dude tremendously. Now, Norv did play a huge role in that, no doubt, but the weapons did also. I wouldn't be mad if you drafted a receiver 3 years in a row. Look, if we're going to have an argument about Bryce and say like, oh man, he needs all this to be successful. Okay, cool. Well, then give it to him, period. Because if your argument is he needs all that to be successful, then why not do everything possible to make him successful, right? Why not, take the gamble? Now, I know that you could potentially end yourself up in a situation where, taking 3 receivers in a row and you kind of, negate the defense and kind of lag in that, that area, certain parts of the defense anyway. But I just personally think that where you are right now and what you have at your disposal, I hate to, because I think a good draft can really take this team over the top. And I don't want to be foolish enough to say like, oh, well, we got enough. I wouldn't say that. But if I had the choice, I mean, Chicago, Colston Loveland, let's see who else. So let me see, how did it go? It went Romeo Adunes, Colston Loveland, Luther Burden, and they got DJ Moore in a trade from us. So now DJ's gone, but they still drafting weapons, right? And yeah, you got some defensive efficiencies, but trust and believe, them crazy throws that you saw last year and what got them to the record they got to and got them to the playoffs, that offense humming at a high level. That's the same thing can happen here with a move like this. I really personally like this as an opportunity. That's just me. So I want to hear what you guys say. This is why I'm a fan of Sadiq for an offensive weapon at we'll join Brad in a second. This is why I'm a fan of Sadiq for an offensive weapon at 19. He lets Excel get a third year to show he's truly a bust or not. Earl Lockley said we don't need any more wide receivers. AJ Brooks said three receivers. 3 years in a row is absurd. I knew some of y'all wouldn't like that. What's good? Yes. Yak deep threat returner. Couldn't agree more. If we draft KC, you can say bye to Jimmy Horn. I probably, and I ain't gonna lie, I'd be a little sad about it, but we'll see what happens. But either way, before we continue any further, let's bring in our co-host with the most, my man, the invisible one, Bradford. What's good, my brother?
What you say, my brother? Salami, eggs, and bacon.
Salami, eggs, and bacon. My man in the building. So, we were at the KC Concepcion conversation, and we'll start there. I'll circle back to the Ruben Bain thing kind of at the end, but I wanted to add you in on this because Josh Norris, hold on, I'm gonna read this comment real quick. He says, every fan loves the idea of getting a wide receiver until they have to do it. This team lacks an explosive player and a true tight end. I don't disagree with that. And look, again, I completely agree with you. TCJ, what quarterback doesn't need weapons to be successful? Look, I'm in agreement with that, right? But I'm speaking literally to the crowd that says this, because it's not just us. It's not just Bryce. People say this about other quarterbacks. Oh, he won't be successful. You got to have all this stuff around him. Man, go look at Tom Brady's last year in New England and look at his stat line, right? You're talking about Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback ever, struggled with guys like N'Keal Harry, right? And so what happened when he went to Tampa and he had all those weapons at his disposal? Well, I'll tell you, that's another Super Bowl in our division. So that's not in our stadium. But either way, Brad, I wanted to go over this with you. So we were going over, shout out to my man, Edgar Salmingo, who had dropped a list of the top 30 visits that we had, including Diego Pavia, and then in the wide receiver room, Casey Concepcion. But I wanted to ask you about the Pavia. So I personally, and like I said, I make no bones about this. If they pick Pavia, I won't like it. I'm going to be support because I'm always in support of anything in processed blue, but not for me. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, the kid had a lot of things going on lately, on top of his, height, attitude, those type of things. To me, I mean, no one drafts him and we bring him in, that's fine. But actually devoting a pick for him, I think that would be a bit much. I mean, he's projected to go undrafted, and so it just doesn't make sense to me really at all to pick him and put a pick on that when, I mean, I get like we've set ourselves up for some real BPA, but I think that there are other quarterbacks. I'm real big on Drew Aller. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to give a pick towards it, I think he's the guy that'll be there 4th, 5th round. Why not do that? You know what I'm saying? Why not pick someone who's 6'5", 225 and can throw the ball 80 yards in the air? You know what I'm saying? Like, to work with. I mean, it could be a Kyle Trask thing, like Tampa Bay, and he never really amount to much. But taking a guy who's been in college forever and he's even smaller than your small quarterback, and then, like I said, all the extracurricular stuff that's kind of come out, how he's been talking, pretty crazy. I just don't think that he's a guy that I would, spend any real draft capital on.
I couldn't agree more. Now, someone had commented earlier, and I think it was Donnie. Donnie had mentioned, he said, Diego would be a great backup. You're getting the same player as Bryce, maybe not as far as reading defense, but good for a backup, still using throwing lanes instead of height. No change in the game plan. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with that in some respects, the only thing for me is that, and there could be an argument made that, not the same player, based on scheme anyway. But the main thing for me was, like I said, when he came out and said that Johnny Manziel was mentoring him, I was like, yeah, nah, I'm cool. Because,
So I'm saying,
you know what I'm saying? Yeah, yeah, straight up. And the reason is because it's like when you're picking mentors, right? Like um, I haven't really been around and been able to have conversation about a lot of this Jalen Hurts stuff that's been going on. And honestly, at this point, like I really don't have nothing to really say about it. But I will say this: one of the more fascinating things about Jalen Hurts that I found out, last year, and because he shared this, and this was something that didn't really get talked about a lot, and it hadn't been talked about a lot in this conversation, is like when Jalen Hurts picked a mentor, right? Usually, people who succeed in life pick mentors in things that they don't succeed in. Why? Because you want to learn that information from somebody that can help you. One of the biggest knocks on Jalen Hurts is like, oh, well, he's not a pocket passer. As if he can't develop himself into becoming that, right? With just reps, and knowing his offense, and having good cohesion with his weapons and all that kind of stuff. And who better to help mentor you than the guy who kind of revolutionized the position, if we're honest, in Peyton Manning, who he took on as a mentor kind of inadvertently, right? Like, so Peyton had mentioned, like, man, after the Super Bowl, like Jalen just started hitting him and just start calling him like all the time, because they had like a little brief, interaction during the first Super Bowl that he played in, and he was like, and then he just kept calling and kept calling. So like now they have a meeting like during the season once a week where they just kind of talk and go over stuff, and he'll kind of critique his game plan and all that kind of stuff and give him tips and pointers. And he was like, I never expected of all guys Jalen Hurts to reach out to me, because they couldn't be more different as far as players are concerned. So you can pick your mentors well, right? Because conventional wisdom would say, why wouldn't Jalen pick a guy like Cam Newton because he's more like him? Well, it's because I want to do things that, like, you and I kind of already do the same kind of thing. You do it far better than I ever did. But there's things that I want to develop about my game to become a little bit different and be better in a more traditional sense, if that makes sense. So when you're Diego Pavia, to me, when you pick Johnny Manziel as your mentor, let me tell you what you're saying. Oh, dog, you just like me. You know what I'm saying? You give it up like I give it up. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, bump this Heisman stuff. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever. I'm like, no, man, get that away from me. I don't want that. I don't want nothing like that near us, period. So I'm cool with the visit, but like, nah, I'm sorry. Nope.
well, I mean, Manziel's kind of went on a this is what went wrong tour, and that's something that he could kind of tell the kid like, hey man, this is where I went wrong. Don't be like me. But it's still one of those things where the talent, height, all those kind of things on top of the attitude issues is just like you said, it's a big no.
Yeah. Big no. All right, now let's get to it, man. Let's argue a little bit. So then let's get down to receivers. So Denzel Boston, Deion Burks, Casey Concepcion, and Omar Cooper Jr. all had top 30 visits. And I mentioned this earlier. Josh Norris, formerly a cover of the Carolina Panthers, who now works for Underdog Fantasy, came out and said that the Carolina Panthers, with good information on his behalf, Josh Norris has said these things. When we picked Ikem Ekwonu, Josh Norris nailed it on the head, right? He called it long before we did it, because there was the big, will we pick Icky or the tackle from Alabama who went to New York? I can't remember his name. But he was, pretty dogged. Like, he had the inside information that Icky was the guy, right? And if Icky wasn't there, then they probably would have went in a completely different direction. So a guy that's tapped in, and he says that, the Panthers are high on, two positions mainly: wide receiver, offensive line. And the receiver that they love is Casey Concepcion, right? And I know you and I talked, and there's some people in the chat that also have a little bit of disdain for this. But let's start with this first before we get into the player. What is your reaction on next Thursday if at pick 19, because I will be live. I don't know that you'll be there with me, but I'll be live watching this draft. What will be your reaction if they decide to take Casey Concepcion at 19 if he's there?
Disappointment. And I'll tell you why.
Go ahead.
because one, the kid's not a burner. You know what I'm saying? He's more quick than fast. I understand that's a big thing you want if like you got somebody in the slot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he has had issues with drops,
Indeed.
and on top of having issues with drops, not being the kind of guy that can take the top off of defense. What's different about him than a second year Jimmy Horn or a recovered, recuperated, fully healthy Michi?
Mm.
And really been looking at stuff about Michi out here, and like the thing is, people are really excited because like this kid had production
Mm-hmm.
before he was slapped with a leukemia diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Then a subsequent injury. Um, and it, they don't have a power station beside their stadium like or by their practice field like San Francisco 49ers, but it seemed like every receiver on Houston's roster got hurt. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? um,
That's very interesting you say that, but conspiracy
yeah,
theory.
yeah. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
odd. You know what I'm saying? So him being fully healthy, um, being a big part of Bryce's I mean, high school. I wasn't going to say high school for a college career, man. I mean, he's just a you know comfortability factor, and it's just like there are so many things because like we have set ourselves up for BPA, but let's be honest, Icky knee injury could be something that could keep him out for a very long time. He could never be the same player. I mean, we all remember how dominant Jeff Otah was.
Yeah.
And then Jeff Otah started having knee issues and he just fell off the face of the earth. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but there's a big chance that could happen with Icky. Then Timo has a degenerative knee issue.
Yeah.
He plays through it. He plays tough. There's not a huge fall off. But I mean, he's not going to be the kind of guy that's going to play till he's 40. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah.
Um, and there are some real dogs that are going to fall because of your linebackers, your Arvell Reeses, you know what I'm saying, your Styles. And so, I mean, Blake Miller from Clemson, I mean, his his comparison is, um, Lance from Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like if you can get a kid like that on your team for the foreseeable future, man, I mean, you're set at tackle. I
Yeah.
don't understand with as deep as a receiver room as we have now, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like you can make the David Moore thing work because we have two spaces on the practice squad now for veteran players. I feel like if we put David Moore on the practice squad, no one's going to pick him up. So that way you can keep Jimmy, you can
Yeah.
keep Excel. You know what I'm saying? You can keep Michi. Um, and if Michi turns out to be nothing but a camp body, you still have a super solid, wide receiver room. And we were all so excited about what, you know, T Mac did as a rookie and, what we got out of Jalen, you know what I'm saying, right there in the playoff game. I mean, 100 plus, 120 plus yards receiving. Um, where is this need for a new wide receiver coming from? I feel like it's
Mm-hmm.
smoke. I
I.
feel like
Mm-hmm.
it's a thing, like it's a tool. Someone wants to move up, take some of these guys. We can trade down to later in the first round, gain picks, and still have like a gluttony of options.
I don't feel okay. So that's a lot, and I don't.
I know went on for a little too
No,
long,
no,
but
it's cool. Like that's what that's what we're here for. Obviously there's some pushback, and I want to read a comment that I think is kind of I lean on both sides of this, right? So on one hand, I agree with what you're saying, right? But some of it is an unknown, right? I don't know what kind of work Jimmy's putting in this offseason and what he'll become as far as his opportunities like in this offense next year with Brad isn't. Maybe Brad sees something in him that we don't see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the one thing I can say is that this was Steve Smith's argument, and this is the reason why I kind of lean on the other side as well of people like JP Tay, for example, right? JP Tay talks about it from the perspective of, what we have in terms of like signings and what things look like. So he says outside of McMillan, we have Coker on a short-term deal. XL hasn't worked out yet. Mechie only a 1-year deal. We need to build out this room with a lot more people. Okay, so I agree with that to some degree, and here's why. Some of it, like from your perspective, is the unknown. Yes, Jimmy. Yes, Mechie, right? So we haven't seen Mechie have high-level production, and part of that could be because he's played with the freaking Jets, and then he was sick when he was with Houston, and he kind of got replaced by guys like Tank Dell and others, right? And then Nico Collins, when you got a guy like that, like he's going to get the majority of the targets. I personally see Mechie as more of an Adam Thielen type, a guy who just understands the game and, can route you up and stuff like that. But even he's not a burner. He's not a guy that can really get away from you. That wasn't what he was at Alabama. Like he was a possession guy, right? And so like Jameson was the burner, right? And Jahmyr Gibbs, was the burner. But that to me, that's the one thing, and that was Smitty's argument when we drafted McMillan, because he's like, okay, well, you got XL, right? And I know you're not getting the production out of him that you would, like to have, and he's, dropping passes and all that kind of stuff, but you do have him, and he's a perimeter weapon, right? And you found this, Jim out of Holy Cross, who's also a perimeter weapon, right? And you got Adam Thielen, who's a possession receiver. Like, where's your speed? Like, who's going to take the top off of defense? Who's going to, or on the inside, like if you need against the Rams, you got a 4th and whatever situation, and you just need a quick, a quick out or, a quick curl or something like that. Who's that guy? Who's doing that? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, man, I don't know, and you got a bunch of guys who could potentially do it, but we saw Jimmy's opportunity to do it and failure, you know what I'm saying? And granted, it's a lot to ask of him in that situation. The point is, though, is that I could see a world where they think like, all right, because this kid in particular, like Jordan Tyson is a good receiver, right? Maybe the best in this draft. I don't think you need a guy like that because you would be just doubling up on what you have with McMillan and Coker and XL. This guy is that 92 snaps at NC State in the slot, right? Now, granted, like you talked about, 19 drops over 2 years, 7 this year alone. That's a lot. And that's going to scare some people.
And it's only out of 186 receptions. That's pretty alarming.
It is very alarming, right? So there's that. But as far as what he does and his, like the type of player he is, I'd be good with him or an Omar Cooper Jr., who's also kind of a slot weapon as well. He does a lot more than that. And I guess where I kind of lean in your direction a bit from what your perspective is just like, what if Jimmy could become that? And he possibly could, maybe, right? But if he doesn't, then you are kind of in the same situation. And like you said, David Moore can provide some of that too, but he's not. David Moore is still kind of like a Z. You know what I'm saying? Like you need that guy in the slot. We got to have a guy like that. So somebody's going to develop into that. I still think that they could potentially draft. I saw people throwing out Skylar Bell's name. I think that's a guy. He's a guy that had a ton of drops, but he would be in much later rounds. But yeah, I could see both sides of this argument. I'm not going to say where I lean because I have a conspiracy of what I think could happen at 19 that I'll get to in just a few minutes. But I just wanted to get your perspective, and I like yours, but I do want to read some of these comments as well. Our man, Fayettenam, back in the building. Shout out to Fayettenam. He always gets the applause. Fayettenam says, so why does the 19th pick have to be a wide receiver? Can't we wait to the 3rd or 4th round for that insurance? Whatever Fayettenam says is right. I'm on board. He's from Fayetteville. I'm not. I want no smoke. Poppin said Jimmy only had 11 catches. They aren't using him. I agree with that. And then Ghost Daddy said, I hope we good regardless of who we take. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And then Fayettenam did say the same thing. He said Jimmy Horn is that guy. We didn't use him enough on deep plays. Hey, man, there was a few times, man, where Jimmy was the clear out. You know what I'm saying? Where he ran the switch release and he was the clear out. And, if Bryce would have looked that way and not, the play was constructed with the switch release to go to whoever the person, he was the clear out. The release is the guy that, you're going to go to, right? But look, it's not lost on me when you watch that 4th down play against Miami. My dude, whoever was playing nickel or linebacker, I can't remember if it was nickel or linebacker, man, he literally grabbed Jimmy and turned him around, because if he wouldn't have, once Jimmy cut, he would have like tap danced into the end zone, dog. Like, so that's why some people like myself are high on him, and some people would rather see him get the opportunities than anybody else. But go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, and at that 19 is first round. I mean, there are guys that are there that are generational guys. I mean, if the tight end from Oregon, you know what I mean, if he's there, that's a generational player.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to pass up a generational tight end when there are far more questions that we have at tight end than wide receiver.
Well, I've got, so before you go further, let me just say this to that real quick, because I talked about this before you came on. I like Kenyon Sadiq, but I don't. The reason I wouldn't pick him is because we've got 1, 2, 3 examples now of tight ends in this offense. Tight ends who have not been Kenyon Sadiq. Let me say that, but tight ends who have had production in college, and for some reason they come here and it's a bit of a struggle. Now, if you want to argue with JT Sanders, the health and changing the body and all the other kind of stuff, cool. I'm with you on that argument. I just don't think that this is an offense that features the tight end the same way that we've seen in the past. And that's why I wouldn't take him right there. But if he's there, Dave Canales did say, I want guys that are just going to provide immediate, impact. He would be an immediate impact guy if he's there at 19. So there's that.
Well, yeah, I mean, and we were talking about this the other day. I mean, JT Saunders, man, like I like the idea of what he was supposed to become. And that's another thing. Maybe he will eventually become that. But I mean, we see the guy, it's very Ted Ginn in the fact that he'll be wide open and Bryce will hit him with some of the best passes we've seen Bryce throw, and it turns into a struggle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Drop rate. He's a heck of a blocker. And so, people may disagree that we don't need a tight end per se. And I mean, I'm saying we could be good with going with what we have, but over wide receiver, I feel like that's one of those things that is just a decision. And, I'll read this and just kind of, for people who are, very down on, Xavier Legette. Routes lack variance in tempo and setup, often running at one speed and relying purely on athleticism rather than manipulating defenders with pacing or false steps. Drop rate is a legitimate concern with 19 drops against 186 career catches, particularly when working over the middle into traffic and absorbing contact. Struggles to adjust his body and hands to throws with unexpected velocity or trajectory, leading to concentration lapses on balls that require tracking adjustments. Blocking effort and technique from the slot leaves something on the table with inconsistent positioning and patience when asked to sustain on run plays. Seems like we got that already, and we're hoping that it turns in the better direction.
That's KC.
Yeah. And that's KC.
Yeah.
But you could read that and be like, man, is he talking about Xavier?
Yeah.
Good point. So I just feel like with stud defensive tackles, stud offensive tackles there, stud defensive ends, and, maybe Thielman's going to be there from Oregon, maybe not. They basically keep mocking him to 2 teams before us. I feel like we can get a wide receiver later in the draft. And final point, I feel like Jimmy deserves a chance, man.
I do too. And there's a lot of people in the chat that agree with you. Yeah, and like Fayette Nam said, the guys, these tight ends, I don't know if Sadiq is going to be there because these generational tight ends, they starting to go really high, man. So Tyler Warren was the most recent, version of that. Brock Bowers before him. So, these guys, they do, go pretty high. And I mean, he's kind of seen from an athletic perspective, he's seen as superior to any of them. Like we hadn't, as a matter of fact, I don't know who you could really compare him to in the last 10 drafts even. You know what I'm saying? Maybe Kyle Pitts. But even that, like he's just a different, like he's a better blocker. Like he has a better,
I was going to say he's a better blocker than Pitts.
Better situational awareness than Kyle Pitts. So I mean, he is a one of one, man. Like So yeah,
Well, I mean, and it's not me just saying he's generational. I mean, that's
mhm.
what the pundits are saying.
Yeah, no, I
But
agree.
we are in a place where this is the kind of draft where it's so top heavy
Hmm.
that guys are going to get pushed down to 19.
Yep, I do agree with
You know
that.
what I'm saying? I mean, people were arguing Keith Talib and Skip Bayless. You know, they were arguing with Gerald McCoy the other day over Arville Reese. I mean, we know that guy's going to go top 10,
Right.
but nobody really knows where to put him. And then you hope that he goes to a team that's going to utilize those talents because he can be a 3-down player. You know what I'm saying? So but when you've got all these guys, I mean, they're talking about Styles is not going to go top 10 with his kind of combine, you know what I'm saying? With his kind of tape that he's put on, only missing 2 or 3 tackles. And don't get me wrong, I had my issues with him, but um, there's a lot of talent that's going to be in this top 10. And imagine if there were some quarterbacks that they try to drub up. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, look at Tyler Shuck and look what happened last year with uh, Dion's boy. You know what I'm saying? Shador. I mean, hey, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a lot of stuff can change, but I do feel like this kid does some things that we haven't seen in a long time. So
Yeah. Man, that's a hilarious comment, man. That's one of my favorite parts in that entire movie. I say, Jimmy want a piece of your chocolate cake. Eddie Murphy to go, bro. Anyway, make sure y'all smash that like button, subscribe button, bell notification so you never miss a video. Salute to my co-host, Mr. Invisible One himself, Bradford, joining me on this glorious Mint Street Monday where we are 1 week away, week and some days, from the 2026 NFL Draft. And I think it's going to be a really, really fun one, man, for who we decide to pick and which direction we decide to go. I see a whole lot of Sadiq and, Delp conversations. Somebody said that that was Vietnam said Vernon Davis is a good comp for Sadiq, and yeah, I can see that too. But all right, now, so Brad, I said something on this show not long ago, so I'm gonna go in conspiracy land here for a minute while we still talking 19th pick in the draft. But I had actually this ain't really much of a conspiracy. It's just something based on observation, right? And I had talked about a few Mint Street Mondays back. I said, with this whole Jacob Rodriguez thing, and I said this on the video I recorded as well, the same conversations that are had around McMillan, right? Who, by the way, sidebar, one of the reasons that I want whoever this slot situation is to work out, I want us to have somebody who scares people from that position that will pull down the safety and create more one-on-one opportunities so that T-Mac can go on a generational run next year. That's one of the main reasons I'm an advocate for like fixing that situation. But that said, I mentioned how, TD and, you could, if you go back far enough, and I didn't realize this until after the fact, but people had pointed this out to me like, yo, TD was talking about, and Dan were talking about McMillan way before the draft, right? Like way before. And they said that on the Panthers huddle. But there's clips where you can hear them talking about it, during the draft, like the whole, draft process or whatever like that, even though many people were linking us to like Jalen Walker and, so on and so forth. Well, that same thing is starting to exist. And I said this with Jacob Rodriguez. I said, man, listen, when those guys get in the room, right, it's going to be one guy, in my opinion, that says something that's going to shake the whole room and make them go in a specific direction if they choose to do so. And boy, if it didn't happen, because I want you to listen to this.
And then my favorite guy is Jacob Rodriguez, the kid from Tech.
Hold on, before we get you to Jacob Rodriguez, because I think
I like him.
You like him a lot.
Him.
Talk to me about Jacob Rodriguez and what you sort of see from him.
Yeah, I think you look at guys like him, and the one thing I think is most important for backers is how quickly can you process? Mm-hmm. How quickly can you be lined up? You see something happen and know exactly where you're going to go, and I think he's really good at that. Mm-hmm. I think he's a really good tackler, and his ball production has been phenomenal. I think 4 picks last year, had 7 forced fumbles. He was behind the line of scrimmage, TFL-wise, 11 times, which in college football is a big number. Yeah. And he's an attacker. Okay. Like he goes and gets it. He doesn't wait. There's a lot of guys that are big and can run that make tackles down the field, and you need guys to do that, but it's fun when you watch guys play backer and they go this way.
Yeah.
And they go forward and they attack on angles, and you watch guys play, and it's very easy to see with certain guys how much fun they have playing football, and he's one of those guys. And people have knocked him for having short arms, and I don't.
This is the only time you worry about arms.
If you watch tape and you said he had 34-inch arms, which is unbelievable, you'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Or if you watched him and you said he had, I think he's like 31 inches, you'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. When you look at all that stuff, it only comes around when the combine happens and they measure guys.
Do you know how long your arms are?
I'm short.
What was yours?
I'm like 31.
31. I don't know that anyone measured
So
my arms.
I went and looked at this before we got on here, and size-wise,
Okay.
he's very similar to a guy that no longer plays in the NFC South, Levante David,
Okay.
who I think is a Hall of Fame guy.
Yeah.
Played outside linebacker.
Your draft class.
Phenomenal. Yeah. Stud, great dude, played there, won a Super Bowl, team captain, checked every box. Height, weight, speed. Rodriguez is actually a little bit faster. Levante's arms are 7/8 of an inch longer. You know how many times they said Levante David's arms are short in the 15 years, and
The day after the
None.
draft, it doesn't matter anymore.
that doesn't matter. Like, all Levante David did was have a Hall of Fame career. It's 1,700 tackles. Like, the arm thing is important, but it's been proven time and time again. Levante is a great example of, like, the football player plays the game.
Sure.
And I think Jacob Rodriguez is one of those guys that he just makes plays on the ball.
My response to that, put on your conspiracy hat. With the 19th pick in the NFL draft, the Carolina Panthers select Jacob Rodriguez, linebacker, Texas Tech. I told you, if Luke came out and said this is what I said on the show a while back. That was the guy that you was going to have to listen to. Because if he says that he likes him, everybody's going to love him. Because he recognizes it. These guys know. And to me, in my opinion, because I know some could make the argument like, all right, well, why would you pick him at 19 when Trevin Wallace is right there? Well, they picked Luke Kuechly when John Beeson was still there. And he was a guy who was injured all the time, right? Part of the reason why they did it. 2, why wouldn't you move down in the draft to get him? Buddy, if he's the guy and he's your guy, there ain't a pick too high enough to get him. Because if he's an impact guy, you can make an argument when they start doing these redrafts or whatever like that he'll be up in the top 5. Brad, you said it yourself. There's things about Sonny that you don't really like, right? And it may stand to reason. I've heard this from multiple people. Luke just said, and I want you to think about this. Sonny Styles is a Marvel football player, right? But you heard Luke just say something a minute ago. You've seen guys that are big that can tackle, right? There's guys, look, Claudin Charles ain't no little guy. Claudin Charles he rocked up and can tackle. He's not that, though. He's not that instinctual, anticipation-led style player. So my conspiracy for this draft and the next mock that I do, Jacob Rodriguez is my guy at 19. And if it does happen, it's going to be on the back of stuff like this. Because when they start saying this stuff publicly, like they said about T-Mac, like somebody said about Icky, or whoever else you want to name, you already know, like, hey, if you there at 19, buddy, like, I know we may have what we perceive as other needs, but that's a game changer if he is what you think he is. And Luke gave some compelling examples as to the reason. And my biggest compelling example is this, or reason is this. He's not going to be there in the second round. He's not. He will be. It wouldn't surprise me if somebody take Jake above us. There's some teams that need some defensive pieces. Dallas Cowboys, they got 2 picks. The Kansas City Chiefs have 2 picks. 2 teams like that love smart football players, he's not getting out of the first round. He will be drafted in the first round. He will not be there in the second round. So if you want him, you better take him at 19. Your response?
Well, weren't there other people saying we're going to take KC Concepcion?
Yeah, of course. I'm telling you.
So, I mean, I feel like it's one of those things where, like, the T-Mac thing, like I said, it was a thing that, like, Dan Morgan was talking about, and then it just completely went off the board. Now, if I was to hear Morgan say more about Rodriguez or anything about Rodriguez, he's just playing it so close to the vest. I'm not going to say I know either way.
Mm-hmm.
But if all these reports are coming out that they're going to go, O-line or wide receiver, I mean, I've just been hearing a lot of people talk about that they want to give Bryce as many options as possible.
And you know what? I think what you said earlier, I didn't want to say anything because I wanted to save it for this piece right here. I've really been holding back a lot of what I wanted to say because I wanted to get to this more importantly. I think everything, because remember I told you on the phone, I said, hey, I got a conspiracy and I'm going to wait till we get on because I want to talk about it live on the show. I think that everything they're doing is a smokescreen. And I think that when they draft this kid, because I'm going to make a bold statement, I think that's who they're going to take. And I think that they've been wanting this from a very long time ago because they recognize how big of a difference this can make to have that kind of captain on your side of the defense. Because historically, Brad, we talked about it, man. What happened to us? This was our pedigree. If the Carolina Panthers weren't known for anything else, we were known for two things. We're going to beat you up in the run game, and we're going to beat you up at the linebacker position because we always had guys, even the smallest level of our guys, man. Jermaine Carter went on to get to play somewhere else and start. You know what I'm saying? Our backups go to places and be great. A.J. Klein, David Mayo, James Anderson. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is our pedigree. So I think they've identified this from long on. And I think that all this stuff that's coming out and all these things that they're saying, it's all a smokescreen. I really believe that. I believe they've been locked in on this guy since from day one. That's my belief.
Well, he doesn't have jump off the screen physical intangibles, but yeah, I mean, we all know the kid can play.
Mm-hmm.
We all know he, has the IQ level. I mean, he does a lot of the things that we've been wanting from, these guys the past few years, and we just haven't been getting. I would say, like, I would be happy with Jacob Rodriguez on the roster, but I would like them to do as much as they can about getting as much as they can the first round before taking him. So if that means, because I'm with you on the, I would say he wouldn't get past like a Denver, especially with Sean Payton being the coach.
Mm-hmm.
But if we could trade back and stay ahead of Denver and let some teams come up, and then we could take him there, I'd be more happy with that than just taking him out like flat out at 19.
And see, that's the thing though, man. Like, that's what I don't understand. Like, why? Why do but is it because okay, I can understand. Actually, answer this for me. What is it that he doesn't do? Like, if he was the size of Anthony Hill Jr., would you say the same thing?
Well, I mean, I don't feel like we should take Anthony Hill in the first round.
Well, no, I'm not talking about.
It wouldn't matter. So I guess, I mean, it's not the exact size thing. I mean, maybe it would be a little different because one of the issues he has is getting off blocks. Like, he's the kind of guy that's going to need some space eaters in front of him. And that's not like a knock on him because, you remember when
they all do.
Yeah. When Haloti Ngata left Baltimore and Ray Lewis was like, listen, man, I'm having to deal with way too many big guards and centers, you know what I'm saying, to make tackles. I need somebody up front to eat up some space. So it's not that that's such a big knock on him. I just feel like the kid was a second-round pick. He first started off as a third round and then quickly moved up to a high second-round pick. And then now it's like he's going to go first round. And it's like, maybe it's just the draft analysts, that I've grown up watching and knowing in me that's like, see what you can still get. And the kid is good, but there are guys that aren't going to be there with your second round pick that you could get with your first round pick.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And you got to be careful when you're doing that, right? Who was Mr. move around himself? Scott Fitterer. I think we started off one draft. It was the draft that we took. Who did we take? It wasn't the 2020 draft because none of those players really here either, except for Derek. But it was like I think it was the draft after that. It was the one we took Christensen and Chuba and all those and Terrace Marshall. I think we started off the draft with like 8 picks. Pop, you probably know this. We was all covering this at the same time. I want to say we started off with like 8 picks and ended up with 11 or something like that. And like we really don't have any of the 11 to show for it. You know what I'm saying? So like the moving around stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm with it. I like it. But I also like sometimes just because to me, if you take Jacob Rodriguez at 19, like you're betting on the traits. And I think the traits are transferable. I think Luke makes this just like I remember when I said last year when before T-Mac was drafted, and I don't have no proof of this. I don't have any proof of this at all. But when they have conversations with these veterans, with these guys, these Hall of Honor guys that are Panther guys, right? Steve Smith, TD, you know what I'm saying, Captain, all these other guys that, they have these like small conversations with, right? These guys will tell you without telling you their thoughts about what they talked about publicly. I'm fully believe that Dan Morgan probably told Steve Smith or somebody close to Dan told Steve like, oh yeah, they're high on McMillan. They really want McMillan. And what did he do? He went on his pod and was like, and it looked like he was hating on him. But I think what he was really trying to do is just say, hey man, you really need to consider this because y'all kind of doubling up on the same, tripling up, if you will, on the same thing you already have. Well, I'm glad that they didn't listen. They went and done it anyway, right? And now, obviously his tune has changed, which look, that's one thing I appreciate about guys like Smitty and Cam. You give them new information, they don't stick on their opinions. I try to follow that same model. If I get new information, I'm like, all right, my opinion can change. You know what I'm saying? Or somebody can call me on something and be like, yo, dog, you wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody was commenting on the draft video. Hey, Dylan Thieneman played at Purdue and they played the same people as Oregon. I was like, dang, well, I was way off. So, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, well, yeah, he played like better, better competition or whatever. And I'm like,
Samsonite.
Yeah, Samsonite. Samson Swami. You know what I'm saying?
So way off.
Way off. So the fact that, Smitty came out and said, well, he said they still did it. Luke coming out here saying this publicly, Luke and him. Luke done had conversations with Dan about, hey, what'd y'all talk about down at the scouting, or whatever, when you went down this pro day and y'all was standing there talking to each other. What's your thoughts on him? Man, let me tell you something. He is what I was, what Beeson became, what you became. He's in that succession. He's in that same line. Book it. I guarantee when we get to 19,
you think you said book him, Dano?
Yes, book it. Book it. I'm saying that strong. I'm a clip this and I'm gonna put it everywhere. Book it. You don't get that kind of praise. That's a guy that made the Hall of Fame in a way that most people don't. You're not gonna come out here and put yourself on a microphone saying that about somebody when you got Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, all these other guys at the top up here, right? And you talking about Jacob at Texas Tech, that's your favorite guy? Book it. It's all been a smoke screen. That's who they take. I'm going to stand on it now. That's who they're going to take him at 19, Brad. They're not going to wait. Book it.
Well, I mean, and we have the same issues as we had last year at wide receiver. I mean, you had Coker, who up to that point had been hurt a lot. And, they told him, like, listen, man, this summer you're going to need to stay in Charlotte and you're going to need to work on your body. You're going to have to be in better shape. You're going to have better conditioning, all things that he worked on very hard. Mm-hmm. You had Leggett, who had his issues that we, are well documented. And, they needed another big play guy for sure. And they went and got him. This year, you signed Devin Lloyd. You have your, Chairless, those guys, your backups. And, Trevin Wallace has played well and he's played terrible. But he, the best ability is availability. So I can understand like it lining up for that being the pick. It's just, you want guys, you want to have those options. Like I just know we haven't signed Brady Christensen back. We have one of our offensive linemen that's not going to be back till week 10. Mm-hmm. And that's, in a vacuum of everything going perfectly. We did sign Walker on a 1-year deal,
Mm-hmm.
and then our other tackle has a degenerative knee issue. So I feel like there are guys there that's not going to be there later that could help us on offense.
Mm-hmm.
Not just as much as he could on defense, but at 19, I just think it's a bit high.
Yeah, I mean, and look, in fairness, there are going to be people who think that, right? And you're not wrong to think it, but I'm telling you, like I said, book it. My man Pop said, "Let me ask you a question, John. Who you going to listen to when it comes to linebackers, Luke or Dan?" Both, like because both played in different eras. The reason why I'm going to listen to both is because the linebacker position is so much different now than it has been in previous years. You're kind of asked to cover even more space than before because now your primary base defense is the 4-2-5. You know what I'm saying? So it's not your traditional 3-4 or 4-3 where you got three guys up there and and I mean, don't get me wrong, like, you still kind of went 4-2-5, big nickel, whatever it was in their day. But I'm really going to listen to both because both can give you examples that will look different. You know what I'm saying? Like when you talked about him, in the blocks, like Luke talked about how Jacob can get downhill real fast, right? That's something that both Dan and Luke can recognize, right? Because they were able to both do the same thing. When you talk about his coverage ability, I would say Luke would be one that I would listen to a little bit more because that's really what separated Luke, like in the pantheon of all the great linebackers that have existed in the NFL. And the reason why you wanted a Devin Lloyd and why Devin was so appealing is because what Luke did better than, in my opinion, anybody who's ever played the position was his awareness and his ability to read defenses, right? So it really, when it comes to size, like you got to have size to play the position. Don't get me wrong. But I love when he said football players play the game. If you understand and recognize where you're supposed to be situationally, man, I just want you to think about this for a second, Brad. And this is what makes it so appealing. From the run game perspective and getting off blocks and all that other kind of stuff, cool, right? I don't see it as much on tape as, because you got to think this defense was the best run defense in college football. And they played some good running teams with him at the helm at linebacker. That's substantial. Now, Lee Hunter probably played a big role in that as well, right? He does, obviously. But the point stands. That said, can you imagine you already have a secondary where it's difficult to throw the ball in the perimeter. Imagine having a guy like Devin Lloyd, who's a coverage monster. Nick Scorton, who I was watching a play, shout out to FBFO, who put together a montage of Nick Scorton plays, right? And there was one play in particular where I think there was like a screen against Tampa that was thrown. And Nick Scorton was there. I mean, because he done this a lot. He will literally he will diagnose a screen in seconds. You know what I'm saying? Milliseconds. And blow it up. So now you got somebody on the edge that can do that. And you got another linebacker who's that instinctual that can do that as well. Buddy, how are you running or throwing on this defense? And that changes everything because Trevin Wallace is good in coverage. He ain't that. Trevin Wallace is good tackling downhill. He ain't that. And he can't stay healthy. So to me, it's a no-brainer, because if you lock that position up in the first round and have that with the fifth-year option, boy, you can do some things, man. Man, you can do some things. And like I said, we talked about it. The defensive tackle, I know you really like Caden McDonald, right? I do think that there are other defensive tackles. There's a guy from South Carolina. I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. There's him. You've also got, what's my man name from, gosh, I'm losing my train of thought. Lee Hunter. I just said his name, right? I don't think Lee Hunter's going to be a first-round pick. So if you decide you want to go with him in the second round, you got options. And you also have options at the tackle spot. And look, I know this is going to sound crazy, Brad, but, I mean, was Yash Nyman really the succession plan? We didn't know he would play that well. You know what I'm saying? So you can always make an argument to go, tackle in the draft. You know what I'm saying? There's always an argument to be made to go tackle in the draft. Like, I just think that this is just one of those situations. It just feels like Luke might have just let the cat out the bag. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Or he could have just been answering a question that,
True.
That's who he liked. Because, I mean, we all remember the head coach, Frank Reich, sitting there grinning, looking like he was getting a hug from a supermodel when he was watching CJ Stroud's pro day, and
Yeah.
we ended up taking Bryce. You know what I mean? Now, I do feel like there's way more continuity. I shouldn't even say that, because there's way more continuity now from the coach and the GM at this point. But
Yes. Thank you.
I will say, just the consistent draft projection being
And then
second
my
late
favorite guy is
round.
Jacob Rodriguez, the kid.
My bad. Go ahead.
But draft projection being second late round, overall rank 50th overall, number 6 in linebackers, seeing the guys that he would have to leapfrog for those teams that need a linebacker. Yeah, just like I said, I feel like a trade back, we could still get him, pick up some things. I do know that all of his weaknesses are things that could be worked on, especially other than the shorter arms thing. I mean, like I said, every linebacker, including, one of the greatest, if not the greatest ever in Ray Lewis, was like, I need somebody in front of me so I'm not having to deal with, long arm guards and centers all game. But the stuff about cutback runs giving him trouble, overrunning plays, coverage reps, depth management issues, and then just him biting on some stuff like that. That's all things that I feel like the kid played a whole lot more aggressive, knowing he had guys like David Bailey on his team.
Agreed. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
and
But
I
don't you
think
want that though, Brad? Don't you want a guy that like and look, you don't want somebody reckless, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but don't you want somebody that believes in the guys around them, like that would play without thinking because they believe that you're going to do your job? You know what I'm saying?
Well, that depends on one thing. Like, do you feel that way because you're orchestrating the defense and you feel like those guys are going to be there because you got them in the right place? Like, that's what I want in a middle linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I see that with this kid, I feel like that's a thing, especially if Luke is saying it. And we only got on, to go on the picture of Dan standing beside the kid. But when I look at Dan Morgan and I see him standing beside the kid, and it doesn't look like he's any taller.
No.
The size thing, that goes out the window. And we've talked about the Ruben Bain stuff as far as arms are concerned. And like I said, I like the kid. I just see a difference in what the projections are and what people are wanting as far as where to take him.
Right. And shout out to Charlie the Gamer says, what's up? We getting an OT or a safety at 19. Speaking of, Brad, I wanted to get your opinion because I had put out my mock draft and Jacob was actually in my second round. But, after I saw this Luke thing, I just immediately switched and was like, yeah, I'm Jacob's my guy at the first pick. I'm 19 moving forward. Like, would I be upset with a receiver like Concepcion or an offensive tackle like K. McDonald or Max, the kid from Arizona State? No, I would not. I wouldn't be upset with any of those. But I will say that I'm kind of locking in now that I believe that they're gonna take Jake. That's just my opinion. But
well, and also like so this is my last thing I'll ask you is
sure.
With draft capital being a premium, would you be angry if we were to go tackle in the first round or this wide receiver stuff and then trade up in the second because Rodriguez is still there and take Rodriguez?
If you're gonna take that gamble, then I probably still would be personally. Like I'm kind of off of the offensive tackle. I wouldn't necessarily be off of the guard situation, but the reason I'm off of tackle is because, and I know one might make this argument too with Rodriguez because they're like, well, Trevin Wallace is in the way. I'm like, yeah, for now. But if you draft a tackle, I guess it wouldn't be the worst idea. I mean, I like Walker. I think Walker's going to take that spot and run with it this year, the left tackle spot. But let's just say hypothetically you drafted a Lomu if he fell, or a Caden, or your guy from Clemson, who, by the way, we never draft Clemson players. So as a Clemson fan, I would be ecstatic. The point is, and look, I know you're probably laughing behind because you know how I feel about the Heels, but I told you, I moved to South Carolina. I became a bandwagon Clemson fan. I am going to say, I'm a down that hill. I'm bandwagon. There is nothing original about me liking Clemson. It is literally just a bandwagon because I moved here when they was winning titles. So I just said, you know what? I'm going to follow them. Anyway, that's it. I just don't see a pathway where that guy has an immediate impact. And I think that that's what they're looking for. They're looking for guys who are going to have kind of immediate impact. And I think the guy that I just posted on the screen here, that I put on my mock draft video, Dylan Thieneman, I think that's an immediate impact guy. I think he would probably beat out Nick Scott, or he will, get a lot of reps, and it'll be a rotation.
We can only pray and hope.
Yeah, right. So let me ask you, just because, like I said, I did my mock draft about 3 weeks ago, and Dylan Thieneman was the player that I chose, and I got a pretty good response from that. People really like that pick. I think people are really excited about Dylan Thieneman, but most people think that he won't actually be there. And as we talked about, there are some teams who have had winning records and you usually don't see this, like the Jets, the Browns. They always got 2 or 3 picks in the first round or something crazy, or 2 or 3 picks in the top 100 or whatever like that, top 50, if you will. But like this year, we got like perennial Super Bowl winning teams that got 2 picks. The Kansas City Chiefs got 9 and 29. The Dallas Cowboys got like 12 and 24 or whatever it is like that. So like, it's possible that this guy is gone long before we get that opportunity. But I'm going to just throw a scenario out there to you. You got him, you got Jake, and I'll even throw one more to you. Something that I posed earlier. Suppose Ruben. I don't know if you saw that story that came out, but Ruben Bain got into an accident in 2024, had a situation where, a girl ended up passing away. And, I told you that I felt like this was draft games being played. I don't want to go as far as to say it's a hit piece, but it feels like it. Every year is going to provide one. I saw, and it's so funny that this came out because I literally just saw a very popular draft pundit say, man, the NFL draft just seems dull this year. Like nobody's really talking about it. Like you don't really, I know we do it on our show and we do mock draft stuff or whatever like that, but it just doesn't seem to have the same kind of like fervor that you've seen in previous years. Like when Bryson, CJ, and all that kind of stuff was going on, or Shador not last year, year before, or whatever. And if when he was going to get picked or whatever, and it's like, all right, well, let's shake it up. And here you go, because this story's been out there, Brad. They know about this. He would have not been able to play had this, been a real issue, and he got cited. The article was there. He wasn't, and I'll come back to the Dylan Thieneman thing in just a second. But the article was indeed there that he got cited. And my question for you is, if Ruben Bain falls and he's there at 19, and Thieneman's there at 19, and Rodriguez or whoever else that we've talked about, would he trump everybody?
Yes. And that is because of the production. That's because of the motor, and that's because now the giant chip on his shoulder. I don't in any way want to sound flippant when I say this, but we all know in Bryce's draft there was a absolute monster named Jalen Carter who played defensive tackle, unblockable, any scheme, any front, any offensive lineman. Like, he just completely dominated. He reestablished the line of scrimmage. He could beat guys with an array of moves and pass rush. And him and a teammate were racing, and the teammate was not able to drive at those speeds.
Oh, yeah.
And got into a fatal car accident with a member of the, I wouldn't say entourage, but like a staff member, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they tried to act like that meant that Jalen Carter didn't know how to play football anymore, or wasn't good at football anymore. And so a lot of teams that had needs for defensive tackle let him drop. And who stepped in but the originator of them down South Georgia boys, but GM in Philadelphia, and he takes him.
Yeah.
And you pair him. They didn't have a need. They still had Fletcher Cox. You know what I'm saying? Like, they still had was it TJ Graham? Like,
Brandon
they
Graham.
still had
Brandon Graham. Yep.
I mean, they still had a very stout, very established very affordable defensive line. And they took Jalen Carter, and that just put them over the top as far as defense goes.
Yeah.
And so guys they have added since, you know, Cooper DeJean, like those guys' jobs are easier because you have this mammoth defensive tackle who's fast, who can stop the run, you know what I'm saying, who can get after it on passing downs. And then, you know, they also had the boy Milton, who ended up going to New England. But you know what I'm saying? Like they just had a influx of talent on that defensive line. And it was because people were like, hey, Jalen Carter was racing. I mean, and you know, it's what young people do. I mean, who's one of the best people we've never met on earth that we know through his outside of, you know, on-field production, you know, charitable efforts and foundations? Greg Olsen.
Mm-hmm.
And what did Greg Olsen say? My name is G Reg.
Oh God.
What I do is get that by showing them my anatomy that looks like I'm an alien. You know what I'm saying?
Oh my gosh.
People are young and immature and things happen. You know what I'm saying? So, and yo, bro, they doing it like they did Alicia Keys back in the day. Like when they tried to, you know, shave some of her thickness off in magazines to make her more palatable.
Mm-hmm.
I seen a picture of Ruben Bain the other day, man. He looked like a T-Rex. That brother's arms are not that short. I mean, like, man, the hit is out, and it is on.
It really is.
Neck.
Yeah,
it is on his neck, man. They own him, bro.
Well, you know what I think it is, man. Like, let's just call it what it is. This is a team hoping that he falls, right? This is a team trying to shake the tree a little bit to see if he'll fall down to where they are, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, you know, we believe in this guy the whole time, and we got a succession plan in place, you know, to make sure that he knows that, you know, what he did was wrong and all that other kind of stuff. I'm like, man, that was 2 years ago. Like, Ruben's already paid his debt to society, you know, for that, you know, or I guess sort of. But even the family came out and said that they wanted nothing to do with this, you know, that they called it a tragic accident, you know what I'm saying? So, cause we don't really know the full details, you know what I'm saying, or whatever. But, you know, the way that the family is positioning it is either one or two things. Either they're saying that this was just something that just was a freak accident that happened, or B, like, even if it was something that was caused by him being reckless, we just don't want nothing to do with this. Like, we don't want to put ourselves out there and put our family, you know, out there, as, you know, so we start getting interviewed and all this other kind of stuff leading up to the draft, because, you know, they'll use that, you know, and it's just like, nah, we don't want nothing to do with that, right? So it does feel like draft games to me, you know. So it's unfortunate that it's happening, you know, now, but here we are. I wanted to read this real quick super chat. I am so sorry, Joe Clarity, one of my continuous contributors to the channel, man. I apologize. I'm just now getting to this. Sometimes I get in the throes of what I'm doing and I just completely forget. But Joe Clarity with the $5 super chat, he said both Brady and Luke said the same thing about great NFL players: intelligence, calmness, and problem solving. Yes, I do agree with that. I remember hearing something close to that, paraphrasing what you're saying just recently that they were talking about. So it kind of makes sense when they were talking about the Jacob Rodriguez. And it's not just him, you know, it's more players than just him. But in the context of the conversation we were having, yes, they do like players that kind of have those attributes because they transfer, you know, in any situation. And so, and not to mention, one thing I love about Rodriguez is the fact that he was a former quarterback who was recruited and actually played quarterback in college and then made the switch. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't like, you know, this was something that like DJ Johnson, like, oh man, he's big, he's strong, kind of phasing out of our tight end spot. So let's try him at edge. And then we decide like, oh yeah, well, we should go get him because, you know, he's got all these cool traits and he didn't do anything. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, isn't that crazy, man? Like, just thinking back about that, like, bro, somebody had mentioned this the other day. I watched a video that was talking about how important this draft is for Carolina in terms of, taking that next step, because we do have a gauntlet of a schedule next year. And like, if things don't go right, you could go from 8 wins down back to like 5 or, 5 or so. I don't see that happening. I think even with what we have on paper right now, we got a team that can compete at a high level. But this draft is important, but they were referencing some of the picks that Scott Fitter had made during his time here. And, it just took me back to remembering, and maybe I'll play it on next week's Mint Street Monday ahead of the draft, but boy, was it bad, man. It was bad.
And they were so excited. Hey, EJ snatched that phone up like it was his first girlfriend calling him.
Yeah. Man, it was bad, Brad. I'm talking, some of the moves, and when you just think, one of the drafts that I know about in particular, and this, now granted, this wasn't Scott Fitterer's draft. This was Marty Herney's draft. But it was the Derek Brown one, man. That Derek Brown draft. We took Yatir Gross-Matos, Troy Pride Jr., Stanley Thomas Oliver, Kenny Robinson.
That was the whole defense draft.
Yeah. Kenny, Sam Franklin. Who else? What's the kid from Baylor? He played for Matt Rule. The defensive tackle. Somebody will tell me in the comments. I can't remember his name, but I can see his face. I just can't remember his name. But all those guys that we took, and not a single one is on the roster, right? And it's not just that. Short of Chuba, we got 2 or 3 drafts where like people are just gone. You know what I'm saying? The Davion Nixon that we took, the Big Ten Player of the Year, gone. You know what I'm saying?
The one that hurt me was it Brandon Smith, the linebacker from Penn State?
Yeah, from Penn State. Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Gone. Teams that don't develop their guys, like one thing that I do have to say about this, amazing free agency period that we had, like I like and I dislike the fact that people saw that we won quote unquote free agency, right? And the reason I disliked it is because usually the teams that win free agency are the ones that don't do anything in the regular season. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, cool, you won free agency. Like, if you want to call what the Patriots did last year winning free agency, cool. But they got one player, but he helped them tremendously in Milton Williams, right? But you want to build, like, the teams that you don't hear about in free agency are usually the ones that show up every year, in January, February. That's what I want us to become. We didn't really win free agency when we were, 15-1 that year. Well, sort of. I wouldn't say we won free agency, but we were very active. Kurt Coleman, Cortland Finnegan, who else? Later in the season, Jared Allen or whatever. So we were active, no doubt. But, like, we weren't looked at as one of the teams that won it because we didn't go get some, major need and pay out a huge contract for it. You know what I'm saying? So That's why I'm hoping that, like last year's draft and even the one before that, like, that previous draft with Sanders and Brooks, who's, yet to be determined and, so on and so forth. I'm hoping that those end up being, picks that pay off over time. And I think we're heading in the right direction when it comes to that. But let me read this super chat by Trevor Norris real quick. Salute to Trevor Norris for the $5 super chat, man. We appreciate it very, very much. Trevor Norris said, call me crazy, but I would trade up with Arizona and give up a 27 first for Jeremiah Love. He would make our offense game changing. What do you think?
He wanted us to call him crazy, so.
Hey,
man is all 6s and 7s with that.
Let me say this real quick before you answer this, Brad, because I wouldn't do that either. But Trevor, let me tell you one thing I love, man. This is why I do content. You know what? I might actually make an aluminum foil hat and put it on next week ahead of what I believe is going to be our 19th overall pick, because I live in conspiracy land. It's one of my favorite things to do. I don't take this too serious as a content creator. I love to come up with potential scenarios. Oh man, what would this look like here? And then part of the reason that Brad was the perfect choice is because when I get out there deep in the water, there's somebody out there. There's a ram in the bush who will take the fishing pole and throw it as far out as he can so he can reel me back in, because I live in that land. So was there a time that I thought about Jeremiah Love? Yeah, but I don't know. With what you were able to get from Rico last year, it kind of speaks to how well the offensive line is and plays here, especially when healthy. Um, I don't know. I'm still a believer in Jonathan Brooks. Maybe I'm on an island, and I talked about earlier. I didn't really, deep dive into it, but I saw the exchange between him and JJ and my boys over at FBFO. Those are my guys. I don't really have a take on that because that's them. I just personally, I love Brooks, and I think that Brooks is going to be, if healthy, like a game changer. But the if healthy is the asterisk, and that's what JJ and them were speaking to, and I understand, but boy, I'm telling you, I've seen. I guess it's just one of those things for me where I've seen what he can be, and those few brief moments of what he could be. Just think, if you've watched or if you've been a Panther fan for more than 10 years, think about what Alvin Kamara did to us every time we played, right? That's what you're going to get in him, right? It's that same kind of player where, he's a bruiser as a running back, which I wouldn't call Kamara a bruiser, but what he does with the ball in his hands out of the backfield, like with swing passes and screens and stuff like that, it's ridiculous. Or even just situational plays, man, like that. I mean, the play where Bryce kind of threw him the ball when Bryce was being pressured against Tampa, and he took it like 15 yards. I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. You get that consistently, and we out of here. I'm trying to tell you. So yeah, the love thing I wouldn't do, but yeah, the Brooks I'm excited about. What's your thoughts, Brad? Brad, muted yourself, man.
And I mean, I agree with that because we also, I mean, we have a couple of guys that are very dependable in Chuba and Trevor to also go with that. And then, I mean, we just signed AJ Dillon, so there's just no room in the zeitgeist for that kind of move. So
yeah, I would agree with that. So, but I do appreciate the super chat, and hey, don't be afraid to comment. You ain't got to pay money or whatever, man. I read comments, regular comments too, but I appreciate the love for sure. But yeah, okay. So back to this the pick 19 thing, man. So to go into my mock draft, Brad, I just want to get some quick thoughts. What was your thoughts on that Dylan Thieneman pick if we had that opportunity, if he was there?
Well, I mean, the reason they're being lazy with the Harrison Smith comparisons, that's like saying the kid that's coming out of Arkansas is, his comp is Cam Newton because they're tall and fast and run well. But man, I mean, the kid's a certified ball hawk.
Mm-hmm.
He comes up and plays the run very well. I was worried about his speed, but I mean, the kid ran a 4.3. I mean, has the potential to make our defense the Legion of Boom. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you got your shutdown guy in JC. You have your super tough, big, aggressive corner on the other side. Your, Brandon Browner, you have that in Mike Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
You have your safety. You would have your safety in, Thieneman, who can cover, 30 to 40 yards of a cover two. And if you're running a, umbrella look, he can cover the whole top end. And then you have your other guy, your big hitter, your guy that can play close to the line of scrimmage in, oh man, I can't believe his name is escaping my mind. Number 7 on the programs, number 1 in your hearts.
Oh, Trevor Morrick. Yeah.
Trevin Mayrig. Yeah, that's it.
And yeah. Morrick, I always say it.
I mean, they were a very, very good pass defense team last year.
Mm-hmm.
And this would only bolster.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, think about the certain plays, the one-on-one,
mm-hmm.
man, where It's 2nd and 15. We're busting them up.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nick Scott just lets a tight end run right by him. Or, I've said it before, Matthew Stafford's going to give you a chance. He's going to give you a chance. And he threw a game-sealing interception directly to Nick Scott, and he somehow allowed Puka Nacua to come from 4 or 5 yards away and dislodge it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You make those plays, that's the kind of plays that, I mean, we may go to Chicago the next week and get kicked in the teeth, but we win that first home game.
Yep.
Bryce becomes 1-0 in the playoffs.
And
all those guys get a playoff win, and Nick Scourton and all those young guys.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
The guys that's been hungry, that's been working towards it, in a Derek Brown and a J.C. Horn, they get their first taste of playoff victory. And like I said, I don't know if we go on a run. I don't know if we get kicked in the teeth, but we talked a lot, the first of the offseason about getting 30%, 40% better. This would make us better
100%.
Overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that, that's kind of my thought process. But again, this is Thieneman, Concepcion, Rodriguez. These are guys that I mentioned. They come in and they have an immediate impact right now. Whether it's a sustainable impact right away, it's a lot to put on a rookie. But hey, look, these guys are coming in more prepared now than they ever have, right? Because a lot of the college game and the NFL game is so mirrored these days that it's a more seamless transition than it's probably ever been. And a player's a player, so guys come in and they're ready to rock, man. So this will be a fascinating one too. Like I said, this was my mock 3 weeks ago. I had took Rodriguez in the second round, but I've kind of always, because when I made my individual Rodriguez video, I kind of always was saying like, kind of hinting and throwing it out there, like if they decided to do this would be, something that it would have to be unilaterally agreed, like, hey, this really would be the change that we need. And so, who knows? But I know for me, I'm locking in at 19, and I'll probably be dead wrong. But, I don't care. I want to read Trevor.
Real quick, like,
yeah,
that's what would make me excited, would be to get, Thieneman at 19, and then through trade up or whatever, get Rodriguez in the second, because you have two guys that are just high IQ, like two guys that aren't going to, step on the field and be completely out of place. You know what I'm saying? I really like this from his scouting summary, that Thieneman is the kind of safety who walks into a defensive meeting room on day one and immediately earns his keep. Those are the kind of guys that you need at 19.
100%.
And Rodriguez can be that. But I also feel like you start talking about full drafts and like, because taking him at 19 feels a lot like Hurney magic to me, where we would get a good player in the first round and then it would just be kind of whatever
like
after
fall off
that.
a cliff afterwards, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And so I feel like with getting those two guys in the first 2 rounds, that's already a successful draft.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
And if you can get guys after that can help in any way, special teams, actually, get on the field, it's just, icing on the cake.
This is going to be, last year, to me, this is shaping up for us to be just as exciting as the pick was last year when it was mailed in, because there's so many different directions that you could go. But what makes this more exciting is that this is probably the first time that we've ever been able, like, you could argue that there's times where we've gone BPA, like Derek Brown was a time that we went BPA. We needed a quarterback, right? But we went with Derek Brown. Now, granted, Herbert was already gone, so there wasn't a quarterback that we could really take that made sense, but in my opinion, and we had just brought in Bridgewater. But to me, this feels like the season, like, when we drafted Ick, we really needed a left tackle. When we drafted Horn, we really needed a corner. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is one of those ones where Man, I'm locking in on what I believe, but I literally have no idea what they're going to do on draft night. I have no clue. I don't know if they're going to surprise us and move up because they love somebody so much. Because we do have a couple of picks next year, like a double picks in rounds. We got 2/5 this year. So, I mean, it would take you'd have to be like madly in love with somebody to move up. And I just don't see anybody in that top, unless it was a kid like this that got past Dallas, right? And they thought, all right, if we don't make a move now, we're probably not going to get him. So let's just go ahead and do it. But yeah, or if they move back, or if they draft, someone, if Jordan Tyson falls and they say, you know what, I know we got Coker. I know the deal is short. I know we got, the room is loaded, but hey, we said we were going to go BPA and here he is. So, and I do think that that's going to happen on draft night, Brad. I do think that there's going to be, I don't think that they're going to be like against each other in the room. But I do think that, that kind of conversation is going to happen where they're going to be like, hey, there he goes. Because there's going to be somebody there that, somebody in that room was pounding the table for it and like, hey, look, if you want him, here we go. And what a great position for you to be in where you can do that. That's a great position to be in. Probably one of the first times that we've ever been in that position. And it's a beautiful thing. So.
Well, tell me this, though.
Sure.
I'm all for shrewd negotiation, but we really only have Jalen Coker on a 1-year, $1.075 million ERFA deal. Like, do you think we're not? I mean, like, are we not going to extend him at all? What do you think on that? I mean, even if it's
okay,
a few years, 12 million or something, like it seems like it's got to get a little better for that kid than that.
It would, based on what you saw in the playoff game and down the stretch, it would get a lot better for him, not just a little bit. The problem is availability, and I think that's really what this boils down to. I think they kicked the can down the road because it's also hey kid, you weren't drafted. You know what I'm saying? Like there were 32.
Oh yeah. I mean, the negotiation was shrewd.
Yeah, no doubt. And it just shows you. To me, it says two things, Brad. To me, it says one, because if he was he was a restricted free agent, so he really couldn't go anywhere anyway. You know what I'm saying? But the fact that he got the deal and is still showing up, gonna be there off-season workouts, all that kind of stuff, because that's just the kind of guy he is. It just goes to show you, man, like this is a cutthroat freaking business. But this business is based solely on availability, even sometimes more than production, because somebody had posed. I can't remember who it was that commented this. It might have been JP Tay. Actually, I think it was JP Tay that commented this in the chat, and he said, he broke down the deals. Excel not really giving you what you want. Jalen Coker on a 1-year deal. Why not take a receiver?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So there's a. It might not be something we like, but there's always a reason, right? So, yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, how do we know? Like, think about this. I'm sitting here, and I don't, my takes on Excel and all that kind of stuff, and we had these fun conversations or whatever when it comes to him, right? But how do we know that he don't turn the corner? And that whole, we drafted and moved up to draft him for the 5th-year option, and then he become I just want you to think of this for a minute. Like, Jalen Coker is really, really good, man. But boy, could you imagine a world where, let's just say, you're going to come to a point where it's like, all right, somebody's got to get paid, right? And Bryce is going to sign his extension. That's probably coming. If Bryce has another good season next year, he's probably going to sign his extension. That there's talks about that's already starting to happen, and there's a world that exists where they may even try to do that this year, which is, when I say this year, I'm talking about before the season starts. Now, I don't think that's happening, right? But, they want to see a little bit more, as Dan Morgan said on Kay Adams' show. But they're also, they wouldn't be above it either, especially if it was a friendly deal. If it was a friendly deal, Brant Tillis signed a friendly deal with Patrick Mahomes that was very cap friendly for the team. It was a humongous deal, 10-year, like $500 million deal. But the way that they structured it, the early part of the deal wasn't as big a hit, so you could keep some of your core pieces around. That Bryce deal could potentially be something like that. Not as big, obviously, If he has a monster season, though, whatever he's going to ask for next year, they're going to give him, because you're really not going to have a choice. So that said, that does put compromise on guys like Coker. And that's where you would hope if XL turns a corner and Coker comes out and has a monster season, and it's like, well, XL also played really well last season. Let's see if we couldn't slide him there. And then, hey, Coker gets to go play the market because we can't pay both. And you still got 2 years left of XL, pending him, and a potential franchise tag. You see what I'm saying? So it really is just like chess numbers game stuff. And I know it's a little bit off when I'm saying this, but look, I may have my thoughts about XL. We all have our thoughts about XL. And look, from a personal perspective, I think the kid is great. And I also think that he would be a marketing superstar for the NFL. But from a team perspective, you want that to work. Because if it does work, it puts you in a really, really great spot. Because now you can pay T-Mac. You could potentially pay him because you would be further down the road in Bryce's deal. Other people could potentially get paid. But somebody is going to get clipped. And I think that if Coker has great high-level production, it may end up being him, sadly enough. Because there's a lot of contracts that are going to be coming due around the time that he would be ready. So it's a weird game, man. It's a weird game, but that's why David.
I feel that.
Yeah, that's why Tep said, what did he say on that Amazon special? He said everybody set up to go 8-8. You know what I'm saying? Like, or at the time 8-8, 8-9, or whatever now. But yeah, the league is set up because of the cap. It's set up for everybody to be 500. You know what I'm saying? And the best people, figure it out. So
8-8 in a tie.
That's it. So we did it, Brad. We did it, man. Any last thoughts? Anything you wanted to throw out there that we can respond to, or that you saw that you want to talk about?
Well, this last thoughts, or what are we doing?
Yeah, this last thoughts, man. We're getting ready to get out of here.
All right. I just want to say there are not many things that catch me off guard, or things that are, I see nowadays or hear nowadays that kind of blows my mind and kind of has me stuck for any length of time. But I'm in between books, and I was listening to a podcast the other day with John Cena on it. Mm-hmm. And he told a story about how he was about to get, basically jettisoned from the WWE. Mm-hmm. And he's on the back of a bus riding, and he's up front being quiet, kind of contemplating his future because he's bombing. Mm-hmm. And some guys on the back of the bus are freestyling. And so he goes to the back of the bus and lays down some wicked, quote unquote, rhymes. And and Stephanie McMahon hears him rhyming and is like, "Hey, do you think you could do that on a show?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'll do it all day, every day." And she was like, "Well, let me hear something." He was like, "So I, started, spitting about her outfit, her hairdo, and like where we were riding to, and it just kind of went from there." Mm. And I would just say, I sit at a light and it changed to green and then to yellow and back to red because my mind was blown out the back of my head. Couldn't believe it. And I was just like, John Cena,
of all people,
was about to be at the soup kitchen and freestyled his way into being a millionaire.
Well,
I heard tomorrow.
I heard a quote one time, and it's the reason. Like, I'll share this real quick. I feel horrible today. Part of my reason for my, you guys know I deal with some health battles that I haven't revealed. You know it more personal, Brad, and one day I'll talk about it on this channel or whatever, a little bit in further detail. But it sets me back sometimes, right? And that's kind of what's been happening here lately, is that it's been a little bit of a setback because of that, right? But I heard this saying one time, and I kind of live by this. It's become my personal mantra. 90% of excellence is showing up. Sometimes you just got to be there, man. You got to be prepared. Being here on YouTube and being here with you guys, man. Like, it's it's important to me. Like, even when I don't necessarily feel my greatest, because that very thing may help change the way that my day goes. You know what I'm saying, or whatever. And so, yeah, man. 90% of excellence is showing up. Most people end up in successful situations. I mean, I've heard, to kind of circle it to the NFL, there's been plenty of times where there's been people that, have bombed out, and not really done well. And then all of a sudden, they like somebody might show up to a pro day or whatever to watch one player. And then they look and be like, well, who is that? You know what I'm saying? And then that person end up getting drafted or whatever. Or even right now, like we're seeing kind of the same thing that happened with Burrow and Cam play over again with Fernando Mendoza, a guy who was on nobody's roster. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show, Brad. The consensus number one quarterback in this draft coming up this year, it was two guys. It was Lenore Sellers and Garrett Nussmeier. That's who everybody thought was going to be the number one,
Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And so this guy, Fernando, head down, a grinder, a worker, and just, comes out of nowhere, right? And so that's the same thing that happened with Burrow. Like Burrow was at Ohio State, transferred to LSU, and just, he was there for one season prior, but like it just clicked. Something just clicked for him, and they both end up being number one overall picks. So really, a lot of times, man, like when things don't here's another thing I live by, and this could be something, beneficial for you guys, in the chat and stuff too, is like sometimes we make moves because and we are indecisive in our decision making. I always talk about definiteness of purpose, right? Making sure that you understand like whatever it is that you do, like just kind of focus and be like centrally focused on that, right? And then your opportunities will pop up, like in the John Cena situation here. John Cena probably, spent plenty of time rapping. And then here you go, you're in a situation where, you staying working out, you know what I'm saying? So it wasn't just the rapping, it was also the aesthetic. She probably saw him and was like, dang, this dude's a monster. You know what I'm saying? Like he would be a superstar over here. You know what I'm saying? Doing what we're doing over here, right? And they always looking for talent. Like organizations, places, they always looking. Everybody's always looking for something, the next great thing, the next best thing that we can get behind and root for, right? Oftentimes when we're in the pursuit of that journey though, we're looking to get the answer to the question already. Is it going to work? If I do this and put my head down and do this full throttle, is it going to work? Well, that's where I would lead you to scripture. Galatians, I think it's chapter 5. I can't remember the exact number, but it says, do not grow weary in well doing, because you will reap if you don't faint, right? If you continue to pursue, like, and really pursue the Lord and keep him, number one in your life, these things that you want, they'll be added, right? But if you continue and you don't worry about what the answer to that question is going to be, because you really don't know, but if you have definiteness of purpose and you just keep pushing towards that, it's going to come to a positive end regardless. So I appreciate you sharing that story, man. That's pretty, that's impactful, man. And I love hearing stuff like that, man, because, success happens in the most weird ways. Sometimes it's conventional, but sometimes it's like the most random thing in the world. So I appreciate you.
Oh, yeah. That was Galatians 6 and 9.
Galatians 6, yeah. Okay, Galatians 6:9. Yeah.
And that's, that dude, where the college I eventually ended up playing at, the offensive line coach was there. He was their recruiting coordinator, and he was there to see our running back. And my cousin who played wide receiver, and I was walking to chorus class with my arm around two girls on some malfeasance, and he was like, I heard him say, who was that? And they were like, oh, that's so-and-so. He's, that's Brad. He's blah, blah, blah. And he was like, have him come over here. And I went over and talked to him, and hey, 2 weeks later, I was up there watching him play.
So,
getting the tour.
Yes, sir. So that's what I'm talking about, man. You never know where it's coming from, so just always be ready and prepared for it. Charlie the Gamer, I appreciate you wishing me good health, man. I appreciate that very much. Thank you for all you guys that were in the chat today. JP Tay, Charlie the Gamer, Trevor Norris, Jay Williams. Man, there was a lot of people. My man, my regulars, Joe Clarity, Pop, a lot of people, Miss Velbehag, Nicole, all the people that support the channel, man. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate what we are. Yeah, my man, Vietnam, drop bombs for Vietnam. You know what I'm saying? Because he is from Fayetteville, and I'm telling you, Fayetteville dudes are real. So, shout out to the faithful, man. The OCs, I appreciate you guys. If you want to become a member of the channel, $1.99 per month. I appreciate the OCs, the original cats, for joining. But more importantly, man, I appreciate you guys in full, in total, man. And Brad, I appreciate you the most, man. You always show up and, offer amazing commentary, and you're a best friend, a brother, and I love you to death, brother.
Love you, bro.
So we're going to get on out of here, man. We appreciate y'all. This has been another episode of Mint Street Mondays. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you never miss a video. and we will see you next time. Until then, you know our phrase, y'all. Keep pounding.